the Star Spangled Banner, all those things. And the reason for that is because of the great price that has been paid for our nation and for our freedom. Our freedom, I believe that we take so much for granted. We wake up every morning in the greatest country in the world that's ever been, greater than the Babylonians, the Persians, the Roman Empire, the Grecian Empire, name any empire. And America has exceeded that. And we have come to a place in our life where we take freedom for granted. And when we do that, we are one step away from losing that freedom that we have. In fact, so many people today do not even consciously consider that there's men and women right now that is standing a post in harm's way so that you and I can be free in America. And so tonight, I want to stir you a little bit. I really am not going to ask for a show of hands that even remember what tomorrow is, because I'm going to tell you and teach you what tomorrow is. Tonight is June 5th, and June 5th was the first go day for the Allied invasion that we constantly call D-Day. June the 5th, Eisenhower gave the order, he put people on the ships, and he was about to send them when a big gale come across the English Channel and stopped his decision to go. He stopped it that day, and 24 hours later, June the 6th, 1944, Dwight D. Eisenhower gave the word that we shall go. And when he gave that word, he set into effect the greatest conquest of any army in any time and in any land. It is so important for us today to understand that June 6, 1944 was the exact reason why this church is still free to worship the way we want to worship. That we as Americans are able to take and grow as great as we can. In America, I still believe that we can do anything that we want to do because we have the freedom to make choices. And those choices can either lead us up or lead us down. And I believe in America today that you can still be that farm boy from Kansas and apply and rightly apply and dedication and persistence and hard work. You can rise to do anything that you want to do. I believe that in America. And we need to look back, if you will, to this day. Why should we do that? I'm going to tell you here in just a minute. D-Day is that day of all days, June the 6th, 1944. The Americans and the Canadians, the British, they all hit the beach, and they were supposed to get there at about 8 o'clock. Some did, some didn't. It was a very chaotic day that day, but it was a day that changed your life. Amen? Allie, it changed your life. It changed every one of us here today. And I want to give you just a little bit of this. Hey, Chad, I'm going to go up on this mic right here, and it's going to play. We're going to play a video, I hope. Man.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine
Dwight Eisenhower, on that fateful morning of June 6th. Now understand, I want to set this table just a little bit for you and let you understand that America woke up that morning to the broadcast of Dwight D. Eisenhower encouraging his troops into the greatest battle. Now understand that everybody in America, there was over 5 million soldiers in the world fighting. And there was all Americans and all these mothers and all these fathers, brothers and sisters, husbands, or wives, they were all there, and they heard this, that there was a great battle going on in Normandy. Can you imagine waking up that morning and realizing that your son could be on that first wave going into Normandy? It had been projected for a couple of years. Everybody knew that there was a big battle coming. Everybody understood that there was going to be a big push into Europe, into France. Everybody knew that. But that morning they woke up and they began to pray. In fact, history tells us, and American newspapers tell us, that there was so much prayer that America just about stopped on its heels when Dwight D. Eisenhower began to broadcast this radio broadcast, and that everyone stopped what they were doing and began to pray. And as they began to pray, and they began to go into the attack. Now, the mission of D-Day is very simple. And that is that they were to defeat Germany. Germany was the great Axis power. The Nazis, they were the evil of the day. And so therefore, all of America is praying. They had prepared now for 2.5 years for this, and now they were performing the greatest invasion that there's ever been. And so therefore, they were going to liberate the nation, starting in France. And they were going to go up through France, up through Belgium, and into Germany, and they were going to destroy the great evil. And so many people had so much at stake that their young son, their young daughter, their young husband was there. And so they got so serious about this stuff. I believe that we need to understand the trouble or the depth or the degree that these men and women and families lived through during D-Day of 1944. Some of you guys, Jim, you're 80, right? You're 80. So D-Day was 75 years ago tomorrow. So you were 5 years old. I guarantee you, your parents and your grandparents understood how deep it was and had the gravity of this day. And so we need to know that the mission was simply to defeat the Nazis, the Germans, the evil, and to liberate nations. How did they do that? Well, I'm going to get a little technical on you right here. And I want it to come up on the screen if it will. Here it comes right now. At how big this was. No other nation, no other civilization, no other time in history had ever put this much manpower into such a small place. It was a 50-mile beach. And so they dropped in all these things, and I want to give you some of them. Look at it. 3,950 fighters flew over the beaches of Normandy. There was over 4,450 bombers. These bombers, B-17s, B-29s, all these bombers were hitting the Normandy coast at the same time, trying to destroy the German defenses. There was over, 120 main battleships. Now, I'm not talking about little bitty floating cans. I'm talking about huge battleships like the Missouri, the Tennessee, those kind of battleships firing 16-inch guns into Normandy. There was over 3,500 troop carriers, ships in that day, and they were carrying almost 200,000 people on board these 3,500 ships. There was over 500 cargo ships with ammunition and supplies. You look at it says 600 specialty craft. Those were the Higgins boats. Those were the shore-to-ship transports. All this come together in a central focus to defeat the Nazis on that day in June of 1944. It is America at its greatest when we put all this together and we put at the point of a spear and we attack. Amen? So you look at this. Look at the bottom, your bottom right, left hand. 129,000 soldiers landed in the first 3 hours of D-Day. There was over 1,550 tanks. And then there was other ancillary things going on that took D-Day to a higher level than anybody could ever imagine. Now, what happens is that they attack in 5 beaches. And I should blank that and see if we can name them all. Amen? These places have lost in history their significance. So when I say the word Juneau, Sword, Gold, Omaha, Utah, those 5 beaches over 50 miles carried 129,000 men into battle. You ought to know that these historical landmarks so much. Amen? And what I want to do, if I can find it here, let's see. I'm going to go Omaha, right here. Omaha Beach is where the 29th Infantry Division, or the 1st Infantry 29th Regiment, they come in board right here. This was where most of the Americans died, on Omaha. And the reason for that is because there was a huge German defensive positions that Rommel had put here, because Rommel simply had a premonition, if you will, that this is where, if they were going to stop any invasion from the sea on the Normandy coast, this is where they would do it. This is where all the defenses were. This is where the majority of the troops got killed. Now, Juneau, Gold, Juneau, and Sword were all British and Canadians. Now, I want to circle one little place here called Caen. Okay? Caen had a bridge, and there's a road that goes right through here all the way to Cherbourg. And this road right here, the British were to stop this bridge. It was Pegasus Bridge. Okay? And the reason that that was so important is that when the British landed, they were the first ones on the ground. When the British landed, they stopped the armor on that bridge and stopped a whole division of panzers that could come and destroy even more. Let me see if I can get back here a little bit. Oh, there we go. Right there. That was one of the greatest battles of D-Day. And when they stopped that bridge going across the river, that stopped the German armor from making it to the rest of the troops of the Allies. Okay? So I want to get you an idea of what they were doing. Okay? Now remember, these men had never been to France. They were all trained in Britain. They were all geared up in Britain. They were all from America. All these in Utah and Omaha. These young boys, by faith, got on that troop transport, from troop transports to Higgins boats, and then they get the word to go. Can you imagine how frightful and how fearful it was to do that? Amen. We always want to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're going, what does it look like, what's in it for me. These guys didn't do that. They truly and sacrificially jumped in, willing to give their lives for the freedom of the free world. And so that's why when we look at our soldiers and our veterans of that era, World War II, we need to understand that these guys had nothing other than a deep-seated love for America, and they were willing to give their lives. Okay? So let's go a little bit further. What these causeways, and I did it again. Oh, Lord. This road right here. This is part of the road that the British stopped at Pegasus Bridge. But notice all these fields are below sea level. They're also easily flooded. Up here you can see some of the dikes and dams from the water. This is what the Germans were going to flood to keep all the American advance on this one road. These roads right here, these main roads. That's why it was so important that the 82nd Airborne, the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne, they jumped in the night of June the 6th. And their primary responsibility was to secure these main roads and prevent the Germans from flooding the causeways. Okay? Now, let me give you some, it says 13,000 American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Divisions made a night parachute jump on D-Day, followed by almost 4,000 other troops in gliders. And I think it was over 500 or 650 gliders that flew in that night. Total darkness, without any kind of navigational beacons or night vision goggles. These guys did it the old-fashioned way. They closed their eyes and jumped. And so I want to go back again and tell you what America is made out of, is that the 82nd and 101st jumped into this place, totally not knowing where they were at, what they were doing, and how they were going to get it done, but they were willing to go. And once they got on the ground, they began to be a fighting force to be reckoned with. And in fact, they went over and above their assignments in that this road right here was used by Americans, but was not used by the Germans. Why was that? Because the British and the 82nd and 101st stood the gap and took severe and terrible casualties so that they could hold for the Omaha Beach and Utah Beach to go. These beaches, let's talk about them just a little bit. Okay? This is the beach of Omaha. Okay? This is the Omaha Beach. And I want you to especially look, if you will, let's see right here. Notice the distance. You see the ridge line? And now notice the distance from the ocean. This is low tide. Ocean here. Now this is a recent picture. So we've got this part right here was cleared out stuff. Okay? Let me show you. These men, when they got off the boats and their ramps dropped, they had almost 600 yards to navigate. Now look what it's 300 yards from here, and I think right there, what does it say? This is when the ramps came down, the men came off the boats. Right here, at low tide. This is low water mark, okay? Low tide. So they had 300 yards of sand. They were each carrying approximately 90 pounds of gear. 90 pounds of gear. They were wet. The ambient water temperature at D-Day in June was 58 degrees. Okay, 58 degrees. They've got 90 pounds of equipment. They're wet. They're jumping. The machine guns, artillery, everything going off around them. But what do? They form up and forge forward. 300 yards in the sand is unreal. I can't even walk across the beach when I go to Florida. I get winded and have to have an ice cream and sit down just going across the beach. But that's what these guys did, okay? Now notice here and here the Germans had placed barriers and they obstacles. So that's why they landed at low water or low tide, so that the engineers could see the obstacles, okay? Dwight Eisenhower and all the planners understood that when this water was down, the Germans up here were going to be able to fire directly onto the soldiers. But there was no other way in the day to get rid of these obstacles that was going to stop the tanks, the equipment, and the Higgins boats. So that's why they had to go low tide. Now, shingles a few yards wide, that was kind of like a gravel ditch, a real loose gravel ditch, and it was designed to stop any armor, okay? So that's what that was there for. And now look, it goes another 200 yards on this part. And you got machine guns up here at the top firing at them, right here. And when these machine guns are firing, the American soldiers are having to walk through 200 yards of minefields, okay? And active mines. They had over a year to lay these mines. So there was mine after mine after mine. And engineers had to go through there very slowly, very painstakingly, oftentimes at the risk of their own life and the cost of their own life. And they would have to clear this minefield. Now from here to here is about 600 yards. You would think that an average young man could cover that in about 2 minutes. It took them over 4 hours. Why is that? It took them 4 hours because the Germans were here. They had emplacements, and you can see it's over 100 feet high in some places, and they had direct fire on all the beach. It was a terrible, terrible day for the American soldiers, okay? I want you to know how bad it was. Then it gets even worse, okay? So you've got direct exposure, and then you would think that they'd work this out, but the military, air-to-ground communication, the infantry troops that were on the beach had difficulty talking to the aircraft that was above them that was supposed to be protecting them. In fact, there was some estimates say that there was over 200 Americans killed because of the bombers and the fighters strafing American targets because they couldn't talk to each other and they were doing the best they can. They were making it up as they went, and it really impeded a quicker exit off the beach, which meant that casualties went up. So air to ground was a big problem during the first couple of hours of D-Day. And from air to ground, it gets even worse. It goes ship to shore. I don't know, 16-inch gun is probably, I don't know, how big is a shell, 16-inch shell? They were over 2 tons. It was like shooting a Volkswagen. And that's what they were doing. They were shooting these big shells over the top of the Americans' heads, hopefully landing on the beaches or on the cliffs and the encased concrete defensive areas. And so many times it was so troublesome because, remember, these guys every one of them got wet. Every one of them was in the water. Every one of them that had radios had seawater in them. Very few of their radios worked that first wave. And that's why we have such a high casualty count, because there was no communication between those that needed to know and those who did know. The infantry was getting pounded. They were asking, begging for help. The radios didn't work. When they did work, they didn't work very long or very well. There was a lot of confusion on the battlefield. But guess what they did? They kept moving forward. When in doubt, move forward. Keep moving. And that's what they did. And then, even worse than that, they had, let me go back one. They had unit-to-unit problems. There you go. Unit-to-unit radios didn't work. Remember when we were little, we had walkie-talkies? Our walkie-talkies in the 70s were 100 times better than the walkie-talkies that they had on June 6, 1944. Okay? They were wet. Their batteries didn't last. The men found that the sand, which they were laying in all the time, got into the crystals and it wouldn't work at all. So one unit wouldn't know what the other unit was doing. And infantry is that you have to move parallel to each other. If one gets too far out ahead, then all of a sudden they get shot up. And that's happened a lot of times in the first initial couple of phases of D-Day because units could not coordinate, and it was just a bloodbath. It was the biggest chaos that you'd ever known in your life, okay? Now, let me take you one place that's special to my heart. In Normandy, there was a point, and I'll see if I can point it right here. This point right here is called Point de Hoc. And Point de Hoc, Army intelligence, Air Force intelligence had said that there was major guns, big guns, 8-inch guns that were aimed at the English Channel, which could destroy the battleships, the aircraft carriers, and all the other supporting them. So they sent the Rangers up the Point de Hoc to take those guns. And these men had to climb 100 foot under intense enemy fire using, you see the grapple right here. It's kind of hard to see it in this picture, but these grapples were shot up from the ocean floor on the beach, shot up. They had to climb those ropes while the Germans were shooting at them, throwing grenades down on them. It went on and on and on like that. In fact, read this part. At the end of the 2-day action of Point de Hoc, the Rangers who put 225 people up there, only, what does it say, 60 of them, 90 of them walked off of it, okay? So that's almost a 60% casualty rate, okay? It might be more than that. It's quite a bit. So these men did, in fact, give their lives to take Point de Hoc. When they got up there, guess what? There wasn't any guns. There was telephone poles painted black. Telephone poles painted black. And so 120-something Rangers were carried off or killed because of a false objective. Didn't know it at the time. Now we have drones and satellites and we can make sure, and we still mess it up and get people killed. So that's Point de Hoc. It's a great, interesting study if you ever want something. It's called Charlie Company. Of the Cliffs, Charlie Company of the Cliffs. It's about the Charlie Company who made it first onto Point de Hoc and the terrible sacrifice that they paid to capture 2 telephone poles. Let's see, let's go a little bit further. There we go. D-Day. D-Day landings. Operation Overlord in numbers. The Allied casualty figures for D-Day have generally been estimated at 10,000. That's wounded and killed. 2,500 dead. Broken down by nationality, the usual D-Day casualty. Here it is. British lost 2,700 troops. They got killed. Canadians lost 946. Look who paid the brunt of freedom. The Americans. 6,603 Americans died on D-Day. 6,603 Americans died on D-Day. We took the biggest hit. We took the biggest thing. America has always been that one that's paid the ultimate price. Now, June 6, 1944. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, you may catch a news broadcast or a little snippet or something, but I wanted tonight not to pass without us as a church understanding that the freedom to worship is on the backs of American combat soldiers. Okay, let me say that one more time. The freedom for you to worship is on the back of an American combat soldier. And we always need to remember that. I truly believe that we have failed our generations by not explaining or not by telling them the terrible price that was paid so that they can ignore, take for granted, and scorn many times what America stands for. What's the big deal? I mean, come on, Bryan. How in the world does this even matter to us as a church? I'm glad you asked. The Bible tells us in Ezekiel chapter number 22, verse number 30. It says, I sought out a man among them that would make up the hedge and stand in the gap before the Lord. Guys, I want you to know, God's hand was on the free nations for one reason, I believe. Yes, we love God. Yes, we did what was a righteous war. Yes, all those things. But ultimately, it comes down to God's hand on Israel. Understand that the reason that D-Day matters is because of Hitler's final solution. The Jews were being persecuted by the millions. They were being killed. They were being lined up and shot. They were being destroyed. And it seemed like the world didn't care until 1940. And so therefore, it was God's protective will when those American soldiers hit that beach that morning at around 8 a.m. in a place that we call Normandy. And what happens is, you see 1944, but in 1948, after the war, Israel becomes a nation because America has won the world war, and America sets forth the charter to start the nation of Israel. That's why D-Day 1944 is so important. Amen? Now, I'll give you just a minute. Maybe something that was up there. Maybe you got a question that I can't answer, or something that struck you. Has anybody got a question?